So how do you know the right thing to say? Whether it's you're saying something to somebody in your business, you're trying to sell your program or your product, or you're trying to say something to your kids, or maybe there's like an emotional situation and you don't know what the right thing is to say, how to say it, or even when and if it should be said. That is what we are talking about here today. We are going to dive into the importance of emotional intelligence and leadership. And really, it's how to talk to people in the right way at the right time with the right message. And this whole philosophy comes up a lot because of this idea of like emotional intelligence, because there is a good time to say things and a good time not to say things. And how you can determine when that time is what the topic of today's call is going to be. Now, people ask all the time, like, what is emotional intelligence? And I actually pulled up the definition because I really want everybody to understand just how powerful this is. Yes, as a leader, but also like in multiple different avenues of our life. So emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage one's emotions, as well as, here's the caveat, the emotions of others. So it's to recognize, understand, and manage not only your emotions, but the emotions of everyone. And guys, this is such a really powerful tool when you understand how to use it for the greater good. And that's what we're going to do here today. I actually remember, there's a situation that actually came up, and it had come up so many different times in my personal life with my kids, specifically with my son, Andrew. And I had handled this in an incorrect way where I was kind of telling him how to feel and what he should do. And I was just making him feel like just being like not seen or and not feeling heard. He had a bully that was at school, and this bully was doing things, was putting stickers on his back, was pushing him, was doing all of these different things. And every day he would come home and he would share this new thing about what this bully was doing. And I was trying to give him all the steps, all the action, all the things that he needed to do to be able to stop this. And it would do nothing but like make him feel like powerless. And what I came to, and you're going to learn a little bit about that philosophy here today, what I came down to was asking him really powerful questions to find out how he was feeling, getting to understand it from his point of view, asking him like what he thinks he could do differently in that situation. And I was actually able to empower him to take it under his own hands and actually go to the vice principal in the school and like bring awareness to something that had gotten really out of control. And it was amazing how when he came home and he realized there were so many other kids who were struggling with the same thing, but they were not brave enough like he was to actually bring this to their attention, and how they felt now that he had brought that to their attention. And that would have never happened if I had not been able to like see this from a different angle and to really elevate my emotional intelligence. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to take you through all 5 different steps of elevating your emotional intelligence, when the right time to talk is, when the wrong time is, some things that people really struggle with, and many more things as we go. And if you're ready to go on that journey with us, then it's go time. Welcome to Modern Leadership. It's time to redefine leadership. Welcome to Modern Leadership, where we see things differently. Our channel is all about empowering entrepreneurs like you to achieve the next level of success in business and life. We believe that you can create a massive impact in the world without compromising your personal life or family time to do so.
We're committed to providing you with actionable tips and strategies weekly to make that possible. So if you're ready to become a modern leader and make a lasting difference in the world, consider subscribing. Turn on notifications and dive into our community. We want to thank you for being here, because the world needs your leadership now more than ever. Let's go.
Let's go, guys. So welcome to Modern Leadership, and I'm super pumped to have all of you guys here on the live call. Kyle, what's going on, brother? It's been a while. Trisha's here, Steve's here, Carmen is here. Anybody who has not listened to her podcast, powerful podcast. Anthony, what's going on, brother? Just super excited to be able to share this with you guys here today. And really, as we go, if you have any questions as we go, I see Lori too. Lori, what's going on? I think I missed you. But as we go, if you have any questions about some of the things that we're going to be discussing, make sure that you put 4 question marks before your questions so we can make sure that we can get to them. But we're going to dive right into the topic right now, talking about the 5 key components of emotional intelligence. And I'm going to pass it to my beautiful co-host here, also my wife, Teresa. Can you tell us Well, good morning, first off. How you doing?
Good morning.
All right, good. Guys, we've been having some trouble with like being able to hear each other on these microphones, but what are the five like different elements of emotional intelligence? Can you just like lay them out for us? And of course, we're going to dive into and break each one down, but I kind of like want to get started by hearing about these five.
Of course. So, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So, the five components, like Mark said, I'm going to go through them quickly, but then we're going to dive into them a little bit more. So, number one is self awareness. Number two is self regulation. Number three is empathy. Number four is social skills. And I believe number five is motivation.
Yep.
Our notes a little bit weird there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the five components.
And we're going to dive into every single one of those, how it works for us, how it works against us. And we're going to be able to see based off of here, like I really want you to think about like which one of these areas is going to be your focus leaning into next week. All right. But I do want to ask you, Teresa, before we move on, like, what do you think is the hardest like area for people, for leaders to like lean into and like emotional intelligence? Which one of these components is the hardest?
Yeah, I think the hardest one is self-awareness. You can
Why do you think
probably
that
guess
is?
why. Huh?
Why?
Well, because it really shines a spotlight on us, and it really has us look inward and kind of get rid of biases as well. And that'll make sense as we start talking about some of these in more detail.
Mhm.
But really, we have to pull ourselves out of the moments and instead kind of seeing things through, other people's lenses, see it through their perspective, to really kind of capture like what's really going on so we can really help people. Because a lot of times we will kind of, have things go through our own filter, our experiences, our different perspectives, our beliefs. So, which is not very helpful as far as helping like coach someone. When you go into, giving people advice and everything, that's a different story. But what we're talking about here is really helping people as far as a leader, really helping them come to their own conclusions. And the way that you do that first is through self-awareness.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, whenever I think about self-awareness, I also think about like self-coaching and being able to see like how you relate to that situation based off of your own like personal kind of like experiences and whatnot, and realizing that everybody else has their own version and interpretation of the situation. One of the things that I always remind myself of is like when somebody does or says something that I would term to be like out of alignment of like something that I would typically say or do, I always think about it in terms of like, to them, doing or saying this makes total sense. Why does that thing make total sense to them? And it just takes you out of that perspective of like becoming a little bit more self-aware for yourself of like, you have your own filters, but everybody else has their own filters and nobody's filter is wrong. We used to joke in the police world, like, okay, so you tell me the story, you tell me the story, right? So we have his story, your story, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And I really feel like that's even an oversimplification because every single person who sees it also has an entirely different interpretation, has an entirely different story based off of their past, and when you can like take a second to go, oh, I'm self-aware that I'm experiencing it this way because of my past, because of my situation, but that doesn't mean that everybody else is going to experience it this way. It gives you the ability of like Teresa said, having that bird's eye view. It's the thing of like, I don't know what I don't know, right? And it's you being willing to point at yourself and to shine the spotlight and go like, okay, what do I need to become more aware of so that I can lean into like not only leading them more effectively, but so I can lean into like their perspective and not just thinking it all flows through mine. We all probably have people in our lives that people feel like the world revolves around them. All right. So that's my puppy right now. The puppy thinks that the world revolves around him. And the truth is it kind of does. But we all know people who do that, where it's just always their way, their whatever they see, whatever they think, and they're never open to hearing about other people's interpretations. But sometimes we can find certain areas of our lives that we're like that too. So being able to point the finger at yourself, not in as a shame or guilt or humiliation, but just so you can continue to level up, because when you know what the problem is, you can find the solution to it, right? And that starts by focusing on your self-awareness. So I think you have some
Yes.
questions that you want to ask me, right?
Yeah. So how can leaders improve their self-awareness?
Yeah. So a couple things that pop into mind. Number one is like we all have different of course, lenses that we see things through, but we all have like triggers in our life that kind of like come up that kind of get us to go down the path of what's called our head voice. This is what we teach inside of our life coach certification. It's kind of like the voice that's trying to tell us what's broken, wrong, or missing. And what'll happen is like we have certain triggers, maybe a certain word that your husband or your spouse says, right? Maybe a certain thing that your kid does, maybe a certain thing that your puppy does, maybe something that happens in your business. And whenever you do this one thing and you don't get the results you want, like that's your trigger. That's the first level of like, oh, okay, so this is the thing. For some reason, my brain interprets and makes it mean something. And so this is like, for me, something I need to keep an eye out on, right? When this thing comes up, I have to make sure that I'm even more self-aware of going, oh, wait, before I start taking actions, before I start saying things and blurting things out, you'll hear that a lot about today, guys. Emotional intelligence is you being able to think it through before the words come out, instead of just immediately reacting to whatever pops into your mind, because that is only one filter. But if you pause, you can now run it through other filters, and then you can have a better idea of like what to say. Even from talking about a family perspective, in business, anything like that, is being able to figure and interpret and do the things that we're going to be talking about here today, but giving yourself that time and that space between when you have that stimulus and your response, right? Giving it some extra time, but really being able to identify what your triggers are so important. Another thing that I think about is like the reason why I literally wrote a book about mastering your life through self-coaching. This is really about self-awareness, is being able to become aware of what's going on in your brain that's causing you to feel a certain way, that's causing you to take a certain action or not take action in your life, and is causing you to manifest things. The one thing for me is that I always think about like, I'm willing to be self-aware, even if it hurts a little bit, because I want to model the behavior that I want to see in others. Think about what the world would look like if people were willing to like literally be more self-aware of how they showed up in your life, how they showed up to kids, how they showed up to their family, and really not see it from one perspective, but see it from multiple perspectives. We'd be a lot more caring of a society. Wouldn't be so many haters, right? And so when I think about like leaning into self-awareness, yes, it can be a little bit difficult at times, but it also gives me the greatest ability of modeling the behavior for others. So that's what I would say. Anything else come up for you?
Yeah. So I have another question for you. So like, give us an example of like how self-awareness in your life has like influenced the way you make decisions.
That's a good one. So, okay. I'm going to take this to the nth degree. All right. Because I want to show you how this actually affected me in my police career from the time that I didn't have coaching and I didn't know how to lead through the power of not only empathy, but emotional intelligence. And instead, I didn't have any of those tools. So I would get to a radio call and it would be like, this is what happened. These are the facts. You're going to go into custody. And here's all the reasons why you did this thing and you shouldn't have done it. Right. And I didn't have really any compassion or any like inkling of like seeing it from their perspective. And so I would rush in and I would do things in a way that was not emotionally intelligent. I would make people get upset and frustrated and want to fight and like not be able to go through the whole entire process because they were so frustrated and upset at me. And what I realized is I was not a very high emotionally intelligent human. I was just like, here's the rules, you didn't follow them, and here's the next step. And when I started to understand how emotional intelligence worked and how like I needed to become way better of a leader, like I would go into situations where people did some pretty terrible crimes, but I would be able to communicate with them because they're still a human and they still deserve like the dignity of them sharing like what's on their mind, what happened, all these kind of things. And it helped me to create a connection with them that not only would get them to understand what they did was wrong, share with me literally what they did was wrong, why they're not going to do it again, a plan to like, and then also they would still go to jail and a lot of times, and they would literally write me commendations about like how I was the best police officer they had ever connected with, because I didn't have all my preconceived notions. And I had this idea of like, I need to become more self-aware of my part in the situation. And how can I show up as the best version of me, the best police officer that this family needs right now, and doing it in a way that like actually repairs things rather than tear things apart. So I would constantly be asking myself, like, why would this person think it would be okay to do these things? Now, notice I didn't say why it is okay to do those things, because what those people, a lot of people were doing was not okay. You know, beating your significant other, doing things to your kids, like that is not okay. But why would they see like it was like something that they could like rationalize in their brain. It helped me connect with them on a human level. And yes, they still had to pay for whatever it is they did, or there still was damage to it, but not any additional damage because of me, right? Can't tell you how many times I was dealing with like family situations where kids had to be taken away. And like the amount of emotional intelligence that you need or that is best for that situation is why like I wouldn't get into a lot of fights while I was on duty. I would get people to comply with me, and I would make the situation better when I left than when it was first there. So that's what I would say is like, whenever you have a situation where, I mean, in those situations, like what's the right thing to say or what's the right thing to do? But I like being willing to focus on your self-awareness, how you can actually show up in an entirely different light, actually transferred into multiple areas. And I know I talked about police work, but I feel like that's something that if you can do it there, you could do it in multiple other areas of your life. And that's how I've been able to take those ideas and bring them back into my life and figure out like how I can show up best for like my family, for you, for Kurt, for people on our team, for social media, and really doing it with that way in terms of like really trying to become more self-aware of how I can show up for everyone else. That's really what has helped me the most. Does that make sense? And does that answer your question, by the way?
Yeah, it does. And I'm glad you brought up, an example of when you were a police officer, because those are really high tension situations. And if you can get through some of those situations with these strategies, like you can get through anything, right? Because like there's probably not any other time when you're going to have like so many emotions, so many different things that, I mean, sometimes are life and death situations. And to be able to manage those, manage yourself, obviously, because we don't have control over other people, but the way that you control yourself can influence other people.
100%.
And that's kind of like, there's people in the comments saying that like, yes, we can't control other people. And that's absolutely correct, but we can influence them, how we show up. Right. So,
yep. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. So let's jump into the next one. Self-regulation. All right. I know we spent a little bit of time on self-awareness. So let's talk about self-regulation. Like, what is it? Why is it important in leadership? Let me know. What do you think? Why is that important?
Yeah. And I think it kind of, even with the situations that we were talking about before, it's like, it really keeps you more calm, right? It's a way to be able to bring down the temperature. You bring down the temperature for yourself, figuratively. And that way you can maintain the situation and maintain a more calm place. And it really, we set the tone sometimes because we're the leader. So we set the tone for the situation. And if our emotions are way up here, then there's going to be a whole lot of chaos, right? So if we can calm ourselves down, then others are more likely to be calm as well.
100%. I know we talk about this a lot. Like we have a puppy that we're training right now. And one of the things that we've come to realize is not only how important like self-regulation is for humans, but also for dogs too. Like if we're like all excited and our voice is really high pitched and we're just like, he's just going to go crazy. He's going to jump on you. He's going to do, but if you're like very calm
playtime
and you're like, no, we don't do that. And just like having that little sense of calm brings calm to him. But I can't tell you how that actually brings a sense of calm, even in business. When you have somebody who brings a tough, a difficult situation to you and they're like, hey, I'm struggling with this, this, and this. Being a life coach, people bring us tough situations that probably like the person needs therapy from, right? But when you can be calm about it and you can be like, okay, let's unpack this. Let's see what we got here, right? It gives them that feeling of like, oh, wow. So they know what to do here. Like they're in charge. They got this figured out, right? And it just makes them more open to meeting us where we're at. I can't tell you how many times I saw like in the police world, people would be like, hey, calm down. No, you calm down. No, you calm down. Like the worst thing you can tell somebody is to calm down when they're not calm. Like calm down. Like that is the worst thing you can do. It's going to get the opposite effect, right? And then you can to see who can talk the loudest. That is the opposite of what we're talking about. We're talking about calming down because people have yelled at me and I'm like, okay, I can see where you're coming from. And then it gets them to calm down and then they bring it down because they don't want to be the person that's way up here when you're way down here, right? Carmen says, being aware of your values, your emotions, your thoughts, and perception of the situation, 100%. As much as you can be aware of what is going on through your brain, the things that you've experienced is going to be super helpful when you move forward with emotional intelligence. Okay, so what strategies do you use to manage your emotions when it comes to especially like high pressure situations. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's really taking a step back, right? Sometimes you just have to take yourself out of the situation if you can. Sometimes you can't, but I think the best thing is just to like walk away, whether it's physically walk away or just kind of like stop for a second. Um, I know that Carmen said, stop and think, right? Okay. Like stop, because we're, sometimes can be very impulsive and we just react, right? And anytime that happens, or the majority of the time that happens, we're going to regret that reaction, that response. So sometimes it's so much better to just stop and take a step back and really think about the next step. Because once we become aware of that, once we become aware that, okay, my emotions are really high right now, what is required of me right now? Okay, a calm Teresa is required of me right now. I find this with my kids, right? Because they're, it feels like my emotions are up here sometimes with the kids, especially during the morning when we have to get ready for school. But I really have to kind of just try to calm myself down, right? This is the self-regulation and just really thinking about, okay, well, what do I want out of this situation? What is the best response that I can have right now? And that's how I do it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And Carmen brought up a really great question here too, because sometimes our brains can convince us into thinking that we have to come up with an answer right now. It needs to be done right now. And if somebody asks you something and it's like in the heat of the moment, it's better to just take a step back and say, I really need to think about this. Give me a little bit of time, right? I'm taking, time to stop and think, which is what Carmen said. 100%. Like, you do not have to rush it, because then you're going to go back and you're going to regret it, right? Instead, you can say, this is actually a very important conversation to me. I want to be able to think about this without having like specific emotions in my body. I want to be able to like give you the best response that I possibly can. So give me a little bit of time. And if somebody's like, no, you got to say it right now. Like, I don't really know, like why you would even be continuing to have that conversation with that person if they're trying to rush you through it, right? So being able to take that pause and give yourself a little bit more time and then also
water.
clear your throat out. I've been drinking a ton of water. Kurt's like, man, he's going to have to take a pee break pretty soon. But I had a call just before this, but yeah, being able to slow down and being able to like process it and think about things like from their perspective and your perspective, you need some more time for that. So I love that. Now, next I want to jump into empathy, but before we do that, I totally forgot about this, is I put, if you go to the top of the stream here, while you're here that's live, I put 5 free passes to the Inner Circle starter. So there's a way that I can actually gift 5 people who've never been a part of the Inner Circle with an Inner Circle starter part of our membership. So if you are not in the Inner Circle yet, if you scroll to the top, you can actually sign up for a account right now for the first month for free to get to experience it, where you get a whole bunch of extra support from us and from the team. Okay, let's jump into empathy real quick. You ready?
Yeah.
This is the third piece. You want to ask me some questions?
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Okay. So I just came up with this, by the way. I'm just kidding. So how does empathy contribute to an effective leadership?
Okay. I like to think about empathy as like you being able to see it from another person's perspective. Not saying that what they are doing or saying is true or right or wrong. It's just you being able to see it from their perspective. John Maxwell has this quote, and he says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if you're willing to see it from their perspective, it's just a huge bump in this person actually cares about me. It's a difference, like I was saying before, as a police officer, just saying, no, this is what happened and this is what you, but instead asking them questions like, so what did you do? Like, why do you think you did that? Like, what were some of the things, the factors that happened that caused you to believe that? Like, why did you believe that to be the right way? Like, it's you getting curious and asking questions to be able to see it from their perspective. So that's why I like to think about, like, when you have those leaders that are just one way and they're not willing to see it from your perspective, it's very hard to be led by them. I know I've had supervisors and bosses who've been like that a lot, and they just tell you and give you advice and direction, and this is what you need to do, and they never stop to ask you for your opinions and your thoughts and your advice. And so many things actually don't get brought to your attention anymore, or brought to that leader's attention anymore, because that's the type of environment that they create. We'll talk a little bit later about how to create a psychologically safe environment so people feel comfortable bringing it. But if you don't have empathy, you don't have the opportunity to actually connect with people, right? You cannot connect with them if you're not willing to like learn how to practice empathy.
Perfect answer.
Oh, thanks.
Okay,
am I being quizzed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there will be this a grade that you get at the end here. Okay, so the next question is, what are some ways leaders can develop and demonstrate more empathy?
Okay. I'm going to take you through this process, guys. This is something that I learned from the Dad Edge Alliance, being a part of a mastermind for fathers, for husbands, because they have a lot of strategies that they have taught me to help me take more control of specific situations, especially when it comes to empathizing. My brain, I'm a details-oriented guy. I'm like, give me all the steps. If you give me the steps, I'll be able to walk through them all the time, instead of trying to just think on my feet. I'm not that kind of person where I can just think on my feet like that and everything would be perfect. I mean, you've probably seen that because you've been watching me here on this thing, trying to think on my feet, right? It's called the LEAD model, okay? And it's called that way for a reason. LEAD, all right? Now I want you to write next to every single one of these, write the LEAD down the page, and to the side of it, I want you to write these words. So L is to listen, E is to empathize, A is to accept, and D is to decide. So this is a model for practicing, like, not only empathy, but really emotional intelligence, okay? L is listen, meaning you're listening to actually hear what they're saying, not listening just to respond. You're listening for the key things that they're telling you, what the situation is, what's going on, and you're gonna wanna see it from their perspective, but you just gotta listen first. Instead of talking, just listen. E is empathize. And that is like, how can you see it from the other person's perspective? If you were put in that situation, how would this actually be the same thing that maybe you thought or you felt? Next one is accept. That is like accepting that they feel that way and not trying to push it away. Have you ever heard that quote like, boys don't cry? There's so many things that I know that when I was growing up that I was being told not to feel a certain way. You shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't be upset. You shouldn't cry. You shouldn't do this, and I shouldn't. And I was already doing it, so that meant that something was wrong with me. Instead, accepting that that's just the emotion they feel in that moment. It's not anything about them. It just obviously has to do with their thoughts. But in reality, it's just an emotion, and it's the way they're feeling right now. And being okay, you as the person having that conversation, to accept that it's okay to feel that way. There's no right or wrong way of feeling. It's just a feeling. And then D is decide, meaning asking them what they're going to do, what they think they could do to help. Now, if you decide that at some point you would like to give them some advice, you can say, hey, listen, I've actually, been through a situation, or I have some advice. Would you like some advice, or would you like me to just listen? This is a key component when it comes to like giving advice and direction, is to ask the person if it's okay to share that first. I mean, I got to tell you, like a lot of times I'll have Teresa and I'll be like, hey, do you want me to just give you some advice, or you want me to listen? And a lot of times it's like, just listen. And there are times when she's like, yes, give me some advice about this journal, about this and this and this. And I'm willing to do that, but I have to be willing to ask for it rather than just jump in. So how this would work, I'm going to explain to you how this happened with my son. So when he was talking about being a bully, getting bullied, I was listening to him going, man, like if I was in that situation, like I would feel the same frustration and anger too. And so I would respond back to him and say, hey, it sounds like you're very frustrated. Like, I know that if I was in that situation, like I would feel frustrated too. And so by me saying that, I'm being able to empathize by putting myself in his situation. And then I would accept it. Like, I'm sure a lot of people would feel that same way. And maybe there's even other kids who feel the same way in that situation too. What do you think you can do about it? That's the decide part. And it wasn't Dad giving any more advice. I'd already gone down that path and it hadn't worked. And he's like, well, I think what I'm going to do is the next time that he does it, I'm going to go tell my vice principal. Now here I could rush in and go, oh no, don't do that. Do this and this and this. But no, I'm like, I want to empower him to create and do his own thing. So I'm like, that sounds like a great idea. All right. So we got a plan. And I could tell just from having that conversation that his confidence in himself elevated, because I wasn't just telling him how to feel. I wasn't telling him what he should do or any of those things. Instead, I was listening to him from his perspective, seeing it from his perspective, saying it was okay to feel that way because I would probably feel that way too. And when I was growing up, I did have people who bullied me, and I did feel very similar to that. And this, like, what is it that you think would be best in this situation? And then he came to that conclusion. And that's how I go through the process of making sure that I practice empathy. I make sure that I listen and I label them. I label them with an emotion. I'll say, it sounds like you feel this way. What's crazy is when you do that with the first L, like when you're listening and labeling, when you say that out loud, sometimes it's like, no, I don't feel angry. I am frustrated, or I am just livid, or I am just, and you can actually like test it and get them to try it on and give you even the feeling that they feel if this is not true. This is why like emotional intelligence is important. I'm not telling you how you should feel. I'm asking you, how do you feel? And then I'm like, oh, it sounds like you feel like you're frustrated. And then they try it on. They say, I don't feel like I'm frustrated. I feel like I'm pissed off. It's a different level, right? But now they feel like, oh, dad knows what it feels like. He knows what it's like to be me. And he knows like in this situation that he would probably feel this way too. And that's where that connection happens. It happens when you're able to take them through something like this and be able to empathize and really connect with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I love this because like when you think about it, like when you think of leaders and maybe even putting yourself in your kid's position, if you have kids, they probably think of their parents as the person or the persons who have the answers, right? They're like, okay, they're going to tell me what to do. So let me bring this to them because they're going to tell me what to do. What this model does is basically they're going to come to you because they know that they're going to be able to pull the right answers or help you make the decisions on your own. And that's going to empower them. Right. So even with, in leadership, you're at the top of the organization or whatever, you have people who you're responsible for, and they come to you not because you have the answers, but because you can help them find the answers. Mm-hmm. So this is a great way to be a leader, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't have to have all the answers. And you can say in this model, you're like, you know what, I know how you feel, but I really don't know what the right answer is. Let's see if we can figure this out together. Right. And then they start to, be more open with things, and they start to see things in a different perspective and start trying to find the answers and find the solutions within themselves.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Love that. Love it. Love it. A couple things real quick. If you get really good at this, your kids will, and the people you lead will start bringing you more stuff. And you've got to make sure that you stay open to this and not reacting. I'm going to talk to you guys at the end about like how to really make sure that you create an environment of psychological safety where they feel comfortable doing this. If you're like, my kids never bring me anything, it's probably because you didn't do a good job of setting this up and you did this the wrong way. 50, 100 times. And you have somebody who's not willing to bring you any of these struggles because they know that you're going to overreact. They know where you're going to like, put them down or tell them not to feel that way. And they're never going to bring it up to you again. But it gives you an opportunity of like, if you've had that situation, we have to find ways of getting them to bring things to you again, creating that psychologically safe environment where they feel comfortable sharing that. So you can start to build that up. So no matter where you are right now, this will 100% help, because this is one of those things where it can be something that you can reverse, that you can actually build a better environment with kids, with business owners, with other people who are like on social media. Like creating that kind of psychological safety is so really important. One of the things too is you don't ever want to tell people that you know how they feel, because you don't. But you can say that, like, if you were in that situation, you would feel the same way. That is a better way of saying it, because like and people get into the comparison game, right? So if you had something bad happen to your kids and I had something bad happen to my kids, but it was way different, like my kid spent 73 days in the NICU and your kid got a cold, and you're like, oh my God, I know what it feels like because my kid had a cold one time. Like, yeah, but my son spent 73 days of his life on a breathing machine. It's a little different, right? So you don't want to necessarily say that I know what you feel, but at the same time, you can say, man, if I was in that situation, I would probably feel the same way. It's a different way of framing it rather than saying that you know what they feel. Make sure that you're open to like saying like, if I was in that situation, I would probably feel the same way. It's a little bit different of a feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. He's making a lot of noise back there? Yep.
Yeah, that's why I muted
Okay.
myself.
So
Sorry.
let's get into social skills, which by the way, I'm like, why did she pick me to talk about social skills? But you want to ask me some questions about social skills?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what role does social skills play in a leader's EQ or emotional intelligence?
Yeah. And by the way, if you guys see that EQ, it is emotional intelligence. I know it's emotional quotient or something like that. But they say it as EQ. So when we think about like social skills, socializing with other people, a couple things come up for me. Number one is like really connecting with people, getting them to, that one-on-one atmosphere is awesome because you get to actually connect with people. But when you can connect with multiple people and you can get them to feel like they're feeling seen and being heard, like it's a game changer when you can like not only connect with them on that level, but they're willing to like follow you and take your lead, right? So when you do give them advice and direction, because there's certain situations that you're going to have to, they're willing to take that action. The next thing is like networking, like getting the ability of like you being able to communicate with other people and use their strengths, just like how you could use your strengths for them, and really being able to like not just having it be a one-person show, but like the community, a team, right? That's why we have this modern leadership, because we want to make sure that we team up with other like-minded entrepreneurs who also make sure that their family and their health are like really important and critical, right? Because when we're in that environment, it just helps lift everybody else up. And if you aren't willing to develop social skills, it's kind of hard to do that. You're going to be like how I still am, which is a little awkward from time to time. But it's always something that I'm looking on developing and getting better. And then I kind of talk about this, is using your skills to help others to help improve others as well. Like when I go to a big conference, I'm not the type of person who is an extrovert and I want to talk to everybody. But at the same time, I'm like, I have a skill when it comes to coaching and leading that I can actually help them through their current situations if I'm willing to get uncomfortable and to put myself out there in social situations. And it's actually created a lot of great networking opportunities, but a lot of great connection that always comes back to help me. So that's what I would say about social skills. Now, you are more of a social creature. Do you have any other
Am I
advice or any other advice?
I don't think so. I think we're pretty much on the same level when it comes to
All right.
social skills. So no, I don't.
Okay.
But I do have another question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
So let's say in like a really diverse environment, like what kind of tips do you have on how leaders can improve their social skills?
The best leaders, like the most effective communicators, are the best listeners. And I can't even spell listeners right, but you guys know what I mean. The best listeners. They're the best listeners. They're the people who are like in the back, really just thinking about things a little differently, really being able to like, this is what this person said. They can usually come up to you and go, hey, during that presentation you gave like 3 hours ago, this is like really what you said. And it really connected me to that, right? And being able to like listen really well and be active when it comes to listening, even like verbalizing out loud what you're hearing people saying or all those kind of things really allows them to like feel connected to you because you're like verbalizing it out loud and they're gonna be like, yes or no, go down, different paths and whatnot. And then I really think like one of the best things when it comes to the whole social skills is really making it about the other person rather than making it about you. Have you ever been in a social situation that somebody makes it all about them and how they're like the baddest person on the planet and they got this and that and I'm just so good at this? You'll find the best leaders are the people who go there and make it about everybody else. Like, guys, if you go to like a conference with me, like I'm not going to make anything about me. Like you're maybe even never even know that I'm there because I'm like, I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about everybody else that's here. So when it comes to like social skills, yes, people are going to ask you questions about you, but in reality, I'm like, how can I make it all about them? And it does a great job of making it not go through my head voice, which is like thinking about like talking about me or any of those other like head voice paths that my head will want to go down, but instead thinking about the other person and the impact that I can make. And like, how can I like learn a little bit about them and pull something out of them? And it doesn't matter like whether or not, or what level they are in with their health or their business. I'm always like, I can learn so much from this person, no matter if they're even just getting started out in business, because if I'm willing to like be a good listener and really like make it about them and not about me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's the whole idea of being interested instead of interesting, right? Because you make
100%.
it more about them.
Yeah, and it's crazy because when you have those conversations where you make it about them, they're like, "That was the best conversation that I ever had." And I'm like, "All I did was like ask you like 5 questions. I didn't even talk. Really, it was all you talking." They were like, "Man, it was such a great conversation." I'm like, "I didn't even talk." But like if they feel that way, then I'm all in for doing that, right? Okay, let's talk about the fifth piece. Let's talk about motivation. All right, are the kids? What are they doing down there? Oh my gosh. Okay, let's talk about motivation. Let's talk about like when it comes to motivation. Let's first start talking about like self motivation. How does that tie into like emotional intelligence? Okay, somebody decided they're going to get ice right now.
No. It's something different. But
Okay, good.
okay, can you repeat the question?
I said, how does self motivation tie into emotional intelligence?
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, what I think that it's more about realizing why you're doing it, right?
Mm,
Like why is it that you're doing, whatever. It's like it's that strong like that strong sorry.
hmm
Sorry. Um yeah, it's really about thinking about your why, like really dialing in on that and
hmm
having that be kind of like the central the or the driving force
hmm
to your motivation.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, when it comes to motivation, I like to think about it as inspiration. And when we realize why we're doing something, it empowers us to do it even when it's hard to do.
Hmm.
So, I mean, these situations of emotional intelligence, like, it's not usually easy conversations that are coming up. It's not just that, oh, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. How are you? Okay, yeah, have a great day. Like, it's the tough conversations that you're having, right? When you get into somebody's like situation and they're talking to you about something the hard that they went through or a struggle that they went through or something that happens with your kids, it's like the hard time. So you have to be motivated or inspired in order to be able to do this and have this self-reflection. It's not easy. Like we come in here and we're telling you these 5 different skills. None of these are easy. Like every single one has its own level of difficulty, but you have to be willing to get through it. And how we figure that out is like determining why it's even important and meaningful to do that, right? So when you realize I'm bringing emotional intelligence to my business and to the people that I have conversations with, because I know it's the greatest opportunity that I have to like change their lives forever. Like by me being able to lean in and to really see it from their perspective, they're going to be more open to seeing it from other people's perspectives, but also be able to see other things that they didn't even know existed. And it's going to give them the greatest opportunity to actually change their life if they decide to. But you have to remind yourself of that, because otherwise it's very easy to get off on like the bad path, right? The path of being unmotivated and why everybody else is against you, right? Why they're the problem and not you. By the way, if that ever comes up for you, you're not practicing emotional intelligence. You're practicing the opposite, which I don't know what the opposite of emotional intelligence is, but it's not good. All right. Kurt has already showed me that it's not good from the look on his face. But it's like when you make it all like, oh, it's just a them problem, you got some issues because you're not going to be able to fix a them problem. The only thing you can fix is something on how you show up, right, in that situation. And that's the best thing for you to focus on. So let's get to the next question about motivation is like, what practices do you recommend leaders use to like not only stay motivated themselves, but also inspire their teams to stay motivated, to be open to emotional intelligence learning?
You just said it. It was reminding yourself and reminding them of their why,
Mm,
right? Because it has to be something that you're constantly sorry, that's the dog. It's something that you just have to constantly remind yourself of,
mhm.
because we can often like just forget that should be the driving force. So constantly reminding yourself, I think, is important.
100%. And one of the ways we can do that is just ask people questions again, right? Like, hey, really just diving into like, why is this so important or meaningful to you? What does this make possible that's not possible, right? What would learning these skills be able to do for you, and what kind of impact will you have on the world when you're able to like literally employ these at any time and then teach other people and model the behavior that you want to see in others? And it's reminding them as much as you can in many different ways, right? They say oftentimes we need to be reminded more than we need to learn new things. And it's the same thing with motivation, is being able to like remind them over and over and over again to keep them highly motivated as much as possible, but have it be an internal job by asking them questions, not it always having to be you who like riles them up per se.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one. This is you again. So this is, about overcoming some of the challenges of
Mm.
emotional intelligence. So what are some of the common challenges leaders face in developing emotional intelligence?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and I think a lot of it has to do with this is just a them problem. Kind of talked about it before, or they just have to figure it out. Like, why aren't they like me? Why can't they just figure it out on their own? Like, why? And we basically like shame, guilt, or humiliate other people because they're not like us. Which, by the way, if everybody is like you, it would suck to be in a world that was all just marks. Like, it would suck. Like, nobody would yes, it would. It would definitely suck. But like, when you think about that, like, you are you for a reason, right? And everybody else is everybody else for a reason. You don't want to have like a duplicate of yourself, right? I want to make sure that I have a multitude of a variety of different ways, right? And so whenever I've seen this happen a lot with leaders is they start like shaming or guilting their people into it, right? Like, oh, why aren't they doing it? If they were just me, if they were as good as me, I know we don't say that, but it comes out in a version of that. And that's the fastest way for you to like literally lose all of the respect. So many different, like, be knocked down and starting over from your trust bank all over again, just by being and having that kind of energy, right? And so, I mean, this is a really big point. Like, when you're having those conversations, if you lead with that, that is going to actually drop you down a few different levels when it comes to your influence, but they're not going to respect you as a leader. And it's hard to like really come back from that. I know. It's so easy to say, why are they not as good as me? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's for a reason, because you worked your butt off in order to get there. And they're not like you, right? And they're not supposed to be like you. Thank goodness, like, they're not all like you, or nobody would get any sleep, Kurt. I'm like, the world would just be struggling with like trying to stay awake, not knowing if they put socks on in the morning or not. So that's what I would say is like one of the biggest problems is trying to blame it on other people or other situations or other circumstances.
Okay, so how do you overcome some of these? Or how have you overcome some of these in your journey?
Kind of like what we were talking about before is like seeing it from their perspective and really just getting curious. I think that's the one thing that I really want to make sure that people really resonate with. And that is like the idea of getting curious. As a leader, you can't be angry and curious at the same time. Just like you can't be happy and sad in the exact same time. Like, there's a resounding feeling that you have, and you need an entirely different story or thought in your brain to create an entirely different feeling. And so if you're in this feeling of curiosity, you're like, I wonder why they didn't do that. I wonder why they didn't. Now you can actually help them get to the root of the problem, because when you're curious, you want to ask more questions. You want to find out what is actually driving that behavior, and then you can actually help them, rather than when you're not curious, right? And Julie nailed it. She's like, it's just a science project, right? Have this level of curiosity of like, hey, when I put the thing in the volcano, like, it didn't overflow. So maybe I need more dry ice, or maybe I need more of that other element that our science teacher, and it's just one big science project. Like, what would it be like if you thought of your relationships, your health, your business, and everything just as a science project, just to see what worked and what didn't. And when what didn't work, you just jumped onto something else that you were trying to find, like, what did work, instead of wallowing in what doesn't work, right? What's broken, wrong, or missing. And when you practice this over time, it actually starts to become a part of you, right? And then before you know it, you're just curious all the time. Like, instead of overreacting, you get curious. Instead of getting angry, you get curious. And when you're able to lead with that, you're actually able to get to the root of what's going on, and you can help solve those problems. And you can't, like we said before, you can't you can't control people or control their feelings, but you can show up for them in a way that you would want to show up for them, right? And let them decide what they're going to do on the other end. That's the best thing that you can do.
All right, I love that.
All right, can we go into some practical applications?
Sure.
Okay, so can you give us an example of how you apply this emotional intelligence into your leadership role?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for me is to stop, process, and then respond, and not react, right? Because, like I was saying earlier, I have to take a step back so that I can kind of bring down the temperature. Because when it's in the heat of the moment and my emotions are really high, you don't really respond with logic. And sometimes you need to respond with logic rather than emotion. So, and I think, like, this is kind of like the overall message here, right? is to, obviously we're emotional beings and emotion is important, but in certain situations, emotions need to be taken out of that. It's not like the right moment. And then you just have to bring the logic, right? Because that will give you a better way of thinking of things and how to respond and not react.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I think we did a video recently where it was like how to have a difficult conversation with someone. And like the whole idea of, of like your emotions in the initial phase of it, you're going to have an experience and emotion. But what I found is always best to take that emotion out, think about it logically, and then insert some emotion back in. Because you also don't want to be a robot, right? You don't want to be like a total robot, but you also don't want to lead with your emotion in that moment if you know it's not going to get you to lead in a way because it's down your head voice that's going to get you to have to apologize, right? Instead, stop, think it through logically, seeing it from their perspective, all that great stuff, getting curious, and then I can insert some emotion back in because I'm a human being, and be able to see it from that perspective. So I really like that. Can you tell me a little bit about the impact that actually leaning into emotional intelligence has had on you, team, your husband, your kids, all the great stuff?
Well, I actually want to kind of share an example of, something that I see to kind of like share the difference when it comes to like reacting or just responding in a different way. So our daughter is a soccer player. She's really good, and she's done different seasons throughout the year, and we found that, of course, like the coach is the leader, right? They're the leader, and they actually are not just there to help the kids learn the sport and learn like what they do in the different positions. It's a team. They're the leader of the team and they set the tone. So I'm not going to name any names or anything like that. But when it comes to kids soccer, it can get complicated, right? I mean, we're talking about not just coaches, referees, parents, especially. I don't know what happens to parents when it comes to sports, but sometimes they're the people who just have like the emotions are super high, and then of course that usually brings in kind of like this reaction, this reactive response to something that needs to be toned down, right? And in soccer, just like in any like probably a sports organization, there are consequences to those reactions, right? And like you get points taken away if you don't respond in a calm manner. So I'm bringing this up because uh, the leader sets the tone. The team will either like respect them or not respect them, and that will affect the way the team plays overall and how they interact with each other. Right. So I think it's really important to see kind of like these different leadership positions and how that affects the people that they lead. And when you have emotional intelligence, you'll not only have like more camaraderie and the morale will be higher because you're, like I said, setting the tone, and then they will model that behavior as well. But it also shows respect, right? Because when you can talk to, I mean, they're kids, but they're teenagers, right? We can like show them respect. Like, yes, like we're like, oh, well, we need to tell them what to do. But when you really focus on your emotional intelligence around our youth, that makes a huge impact because they're going to remember that and they're going to bring that into their adulthood. They're going to remember their coach or, the parent and the team and, or, whoever was in a leadership position at that time in their life. They're going to remember that. And they're either going to have a really great experience that they're going to bring on to their adulthood, or they're going to have a really bad experience. Right. So I think it's really important to think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we probably should have like even said that in the beginning, right? Because like as a leader, we can make so much progress, but also do so much damage if we're not willing to get emotionally intelligent. And it's a consistent battle where it's like, I mean, I could see it when some of the people on the team kind of respond in a certain way, and all the girls that are out there are like, oh, and you could see the impact that it has on them, but also their game. And I also like really think like when it comes to young kids is we mold them a lot of times through coaches, through sports, through things like that. And if we set them up for failure that way, I'm like, man, we got to really make sure that we up our game in other areas, right? And so reminding ourselves of what we're actually fighting for. This is more than just getting someone to get some results or just get someone to take an action you want to take or getting them to show up or not saying the right or wrong thing. This is a long-term benefit that we're doing, and we're not going to do it right all the time. Like, I want to make sure you know that. Like, we literally just taught this here today, but we are no experts. Like, I screw it up all the time still, but I have a system to go back and to see where I can improve it next time. Because that's what life is all about. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to say things wrong. You're going to bring things up in a tone that you don't want to bring it up at. Or you're going to send a message instead of letting the person hear your voice, and they're going to naturally figure out what the tonality is in it, and they're going to go down a certain path, and you're like, I never meant that. It's going to happen. But are you willing to like look at yourself and focus on like self-awareness, on your self-regulation, really asking yourself about how can I develop empathy? How can I make sure I practice emotional and social skills? How can I really make sure that I understand why I'm motivated to do this and the things that I'm going to use and the impact that I'm going to make by being willing to have this conversation is just going to put you in an entirely different, like, not only aura, but like you're going to be an entirely different leader that the world needs now more than ever. I mean, we say this a lot, is that leaders are like literally developed, not when everything's going well, but when stuff's hitting the fan and you're willing to lean up, you're willing to like say, hey, what part of this do I have control over? You take control of that and you show up as the leader that you want to show up best in that situation, even if it's not the best that you could possibly do. You just are always striving to get better and knowing that you're going to make mistakes. And I'm so proud of you guys for being here, for being willing to do that. And I do want to ask you this, like, what is the biggest insight and the smallest action you can take from today's training? So what's the biggest insight? What was the piece that really spoke loudest to you in today's training? And what's the smallest action you can take that's in alignment with what you just got taught? Sometimes we start to think about like, it's going to take so much and we've got to do so many things, but all starts with one step. It starts with you just taking that next step, figuring out what that smallest thing that you can do. And that small thing builds up into this incredibly huge, impactful thing if you're willing to take the small steps and get there. So I do want to hear from you in the comments. What is the biggest insight that you got from today's training? And what's the smallest action? Now, I know a lot of you guys might get to this point and be wondering, okay, like this self-awareness piece, this is the one that people struggle with the most. How can I take a speed bump crash course into developing myself into a very self-aware leader? Because like Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And when you become aware of what's actually ruining your life, what's actually ruling your life, you will have the ability to actually change it. And that is what we talked about on a recent workshop. I will leave it for you here at the end. It is called How to Stop Holding Yourself Back and Make the Unconscious Conscious. Definitely dive into that video. I'll also leave you the link to the how to create an emotionally or how to create a psychologically safe environment that we talked about a little bit earlier, but really being able to master the ability of self-awareness and being willing to ask yourself those questions and not beat yourself up, but really dive a few levels deeper is truly like the opportunity that you have right now, no matter where you are in your business and your life. Like the world needs leaders like you now more than ever. We are so proud to be on this journey with you. If you're new here to Modern Leadership, definitely consider subscribing. We would love to have you on the team. And if you guys have any questions or anything comes up, please always reach out. Feel free to reach out to us on any of the social medias, any of our platforms, or comment on any of these videos, and we'll be here to help. But we appreciate you so much, And thank you for leading from the front. All right, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys next Saturday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.